Picture this, a man standing in the bustling Greek port of Miletus, 2,600 years ago. Ships unloading spices from Egypt, fabrics from Phoenicia, gossip from Babylon. Merchants haggling, priests chanting, fishermen shouting. And in the middle of all this noise, one man is just staring at the sky, silent, watching, thinking. That man was Thales, the guy Aristotle later called the very first philosopher. The man, some people say, invented science. And yet, he wasn't a king, he wasn't a priest, he wasn't born into some mystical bloodline. He was just curious. But here's the wild part. Thales didn't just think. He acted. He used observation to predict eclipses. He measured the height of the pyramids with nothing but a stick and a shadow. He even pulled off what might be history's first recorded business hack, cornering the olive press market to prove philosophers could make money if they wanted to. So why does this matter to us? Because what Thales was really doing wasn't just inventing philosophy. He was road testing a way of thinking that still works today. A way of seeing patterns, testing ideas, and daring to be wrong in pursuit of being right. And that's the heart of this episode. How a man from 600 BCE built a personal toolkit, observation, experimentation, vision, that not only transformed his world, but can still transform yours. Chapter 1. Who was Thales, really? Let's rewind. Around 624 BCE in the bustling city of Miletus, think Silicon Valley of the ancient Aegean, Thales is born. Not into royalty, not into priesthood, but into trade. Miletus was a port city, stuffed with travelers, merchants, and ideas. Egyptians sailing in with their geometry, Babylonians with their astronomy, Phoenicians with their maps of the stars. If Greece was the seedbed of philosophy, Miletus was the fertilizer. And Thales? He soaked it all in. He wasn't sitting in some temple waiting for revelations. He was walking the docks, asking annoying questions, comparing notes. Why does the Nile flood the same time every year? Why do shadows move the way they do? What if the world itself had patterns, not just gods pulling strings? Aristotle later said Thales claimed everything comes from water. Sounds weird, right? But think about it. Water changes shape, flows into everything, sustains life. For Thales, this was the first principle, the thing beneath the surface. Whether or not he was right doesn't matter. What matters is that he was looking for a principle at all. That was new. And this is where Thales stops being a dusty historical figure and becomes someone you can actually learn from. Because his secret wasn't divine visions, oracles, or pure luck. It was paying attention. Noticing patterns in everyday things, testing little ideas, daring to connect dots that nobody else bothered to connect. That's why Aristotle called him the first philosopher. That's why NASA named a lunar crater after him. And that's why we're still talking about him over 2,000 years later. So when we ask, who was Thales, really? The answer is simple. He was the prototype, the original human experiment in thinking for yourself and betting your life that it might actually work. Chapter 2. The world through Thales' eyes. Imagine you're Thales. No Google, no telescope, no textbook. Just your eyes, the sky, the sea, and your own stubborn curiosity. Most people around you explain the world through myth. Zeus throws the lightning, Poseidon stirs the waves, Apollo rides his sun chariot across the sky. Beautiful stories, sure, but Thales isn't satisfied. Instead, he looks up and thinks, wait, the sun rises in the east every single morning. The moon waxes and wanes in a rhythm. Shadows move in a way that can be measured. That can't be random. There has to be a pattern here. And so he starts treating the universe like a puzzle, not a performance. That's a radical shift. For everyone else, storms are signs of anger from the gods. For Thales, storms are weather. Predictable, explainable, maybe even useful. One of his biggest breakthroughs? Predicting a solar eclipse. Think about how insane that must have seemed at the time. The sky goes black in the middle of the day, people scream, priests panic, and Thales calmly says, "Don't worry, I knew this was coming." Suddenly, he's not just a curious guy, he's the man who cracked the code of the heavens. But here's the lesson for us. Thales didn't wait for permission. He didn't need a university degree or a sacred title. He trusted that patterns were real and that he could find them himself. That mindset, looking for order where everyone else sees chaos, is the birth of both science and strategy. So when we talk about the world through Thales' eyes, what we really mean is this: a world where nothing is off limits to curiosity, where even the stars can be mapped and even fate can be questioned. Chapter 3: Thales' Three Superpowers. So, what exactly made Thales different? Why did his way of thinking survive 2,600 years when most people's names barely survive a single century? It comes down to three superpowers: not magic, not divine gifts, habits of mind that any of us can practice. Superpower number one: radical curiosity. Thales never accepted the first answer handed to him. If people said, the Nile floods because the gods are angry, he'd ask, okay, but why this time of year and not another? His curiosity wasn't casual, it was relentless. He poked at the world until it revealed a pattern. Superpower number two: pattern recognition. Lots of people see the sun rise and set. Thales saw cycles. Lots of people watched olives grow. Thales noticed when they grew best and how to use that knowledge to make money. He wasn't satisfied with events. He searched for the hidden rules underneath them. Superpower number three: courage to think differently. This is the hardest one. It's easy to say, think outside the box in a TED Talk. It's much harder when your whole society tells you the box is sacred, unquestionable, divine. Thales didn't reject the gods. He simply refused to stop at myth as the final explanation. He had the courage to test reality with his own eyes, even if it meant standing alone. And that's the real magic here: curiosity, pattern recognition, and courage. None of them require wealth, or status, or divine blood. They're practices. And like any practices, they get stronger the more you use them. So when people call Thales the first philosopher or the first scientist, it isn't because he owned the truth. It's because he modeled a way of approaching life that any of us can steal today. Chapter 4: The Olive Press Story. Turning Knowledge into Power. There's one story about Thales that I love because it feels like a scene straight out of a Netflix drama. Here's how it goes. People in his city thought philosophy was useless. All this thinking about stars and water, they'd say, but what good is it? Does it put bread on the table? Thales decided to prove a point. He noticed something in the sky. Astronomy wasn't just about poetry to him. It was data. He predicted that the next olive harvest would be especially abundant. Now, he didn't run around shouting about it. Instead, he quietly rented up every olive press in town while they were cheap. When harvest time came, the olives were overflowing just as he expected. Everyone suddenly needed presses. And Thales? He controlled them all. He rented them back at a premium and made a fortune in a single season. The moral wasn't that he wanted to be rich. He gave up the business after proving his point. The moral was that knowledge can be power. Understanding patterns gives you leverage. Think about how modern people do the same thing. Investors spot market trends before the public does. Tech founders see shifts in behavior before others catch on. Even on a personal level, when you can read situations, whether it's a workplace dynamic or the way your own habits play out, you get options that others don't. The olive presses weren't just a business hack. They were a life hack, a demonstration that philosophy isn't abstract. It's practical if you're willing to apply it. Chapter 5: The Thales Playbook. How to apply his mindset today. So, what can we actually take from a guy who lived 2,600 years ago? More than you'd think. If we strip down Thales' life, you can see three habits, three superpowers that still work today. Superpower number one: curiosity as a lifestyle. Thales didn't just accept the world as it appeared. He poked at it, asked questions, measured, tested. That's how he predicted the eclipse and how he saw the olive harvest coming. The modern version? Staying curious instead of defaulting to autopilot. Read widely. Ask why when everyone else shrugs. Curiosity isn't just for kids. It's fuel for breakthroughs. Superpower number two: connecting the dots. He wasn't a specialist in only one thing. He mixed astronomy, geometry, business, and philosophy. That's rare even today. when we're told to pick a lane. But real creativity often comes from smashing lanes together. You might not be the best coder or the best designer, but being good at both, that's where magic happens. Thales was proof that breadth creates power. Superpower number 3, courage to test ideas. Lots of people have smart thoughts in the shower. Thales actually tested his in the real world. He risked his reputation on predictions. He risked money on the olive presses. That leap from idea to action is where transformation happens. Now imagine applying the Thales playbook to your own life. Instead of scrolling endlessly, you pause and ask, why does this capture my attention? What's the pattern? Instead of siloing yourself at work, you pull lessons from outside fields. Instead of hoarding ideas in a notebook, you run small experiments. The secret isn't that Thales knew everything. It's that he kept learning, kept connecting, and kept acting. That's the playbook. That's why his name is still remembered, while most people of his time are forgotten. Chapter 6, Caveats and Courage. The limits of rationality and why they matter. Now, Thales was not some flawless genius who solved everything. For all his brilliance, he also made mistakes. Some of his theories sound odd to us now, like his idea that everything comes from water. But here's the twist. That wasn't failure, that was courage. Think about it. It's easy to look smart when you stay silent. Never commit, never test. Thales dared to put his thoughts into the world even if they weren't perfect. He knew some would be wrong, but without those first wrong turns, there wouldn't have been a right path for others to build on. That's the part we often miss about rational thinking. It's not about always being correct. It's about daring to engage with reality. To say, here's my best explanation right now, let's see if it holds. And when it doesn't, you learn, you adjust, you try again. In life, the same principle applies. You won't get every decision right, whether it's a career choice, a relationship, or an investment. But paralysis is worse than error. Thales showed that imperfect action, guided by thought, beats perfect hesitation every time. Here's the courage we can borrow from him. Don't fear being wrong. Fear staying silent. Don't worship certainty. Use doubt as a tool. Don't wait for permission. Test your ideas in the real world. Rationality isn't about replacing belief or stripping life of meaning. It's about building a toolkit for navigating uncertainty. Thales didn't claim to have the final answer. He claimed it was worth searching. That humility, paired with courage, is what makes his example timeless. So what do we actually take from this old man in sandals staring at the stars? It's not about memorizing who founded what school of philosophy or who dropped into a well 2,000 years ago. It's about a way of living. Thales showed us that rationality isn't a dusty academic exercise, it's a superpower. First, it sharpens your vision. You start to notice patterns that others miss. Second, it turns problems into opportunities, like predicting the olive harvest and flipping it into profit. Third, it builds courage. The courage to put your ideas out there, even if they're wrong. And here's the kicker. All of that is just as useful today as it was in ancient Greece. You don't have to be a philosopher to use Thales' playbook. You just have to be curious, willing to test, and brave enough to accept mistakes as stepping stones. So the next time someone calls you a dreamer with your head in the clouds, smile. Remember Thales, the man who proved that looking at the stars could change the world right here on Earth. Because the truth is, rationality isn't about replacing faith or draining life of meaning. It's about learning how to dance with uncertainty. And if a man from 2,600 years ago could use that dance to turn wonder into wisdom, so can we.